What would happen if I told you that Lewis Hamilton, with all your experience and talent, cannot find the Ferrari SF25 even after one of the greatest updates of the year? Are we facing a concept error that will condemn Ferrari again? The 2025 Formula One season is marked by a generalized urgency between teams to understand, adapt, and evolve in a technical environment that does not forgive mistakes. Ferrari, who had been carrying since 2024 with a promising but unstable car, decided to take a helm in the Austrian Grand Prix, presenting what they described as their most significant update of the year. The SF25 arrived at Red Bull Ring with an aerodynamic transformation centered on the soil, a critical element in this soil era that defines almost all the behavior of the car. The first thing that was noticed was a total reform in soil design. Ferrari left its previous configuration of stepped frontal fences to adopt an arch transition architecture. This is not a superficial decision. The type of vorticity that is generated from that area defines how air flows to the diffuser, the Venturi tunnels, and ultimately how the rear aerodynamic load is generated. Changing that structure alters the entire map of pressures under the car, a dangerous territory but necessary if your base concept does not work as you expected. Beyond that, the central area of the soil was sculpted with a more pronounced inverted ship geometry. This modification tries to reduce the sensitivity of the car to height changes, one of the great problems Ferrari has had throughout the season, an erratic behavior that manifested when the car passed through pianos, potholes, or changes of slope. The idea is to stabilize the flow, create a more constant pressure bubble, and thus maintain aerodynamic balance even in extreme situations. Another important change was on the edge of the ground, where Ferrari redesigned the edge wing with a shorter and more redoubled profile, accompanied by a reconfiguration of the rear diffuser volume. The objective here is not only to increase the load, but to redistribute it. Ferrari looks for a broader aerodynamic platform, one that does not collapse with small variations of the track or the fuel balance. This translates into a more predictable car, more adaptable to different types of layout and strategies, something that so far have failed to consolidate. The most interesting thing is that this whole package was conceptualized as the first stage of a biphasic development program. The second part, focused on a completely new rear suspension, was originally planned for Silverstone, but has been postponed for Belgium. This reveals that Ferrari is not only trying to gain time with his solutions, but is experiencing with a fundamental architecture of the car, one that probably compromises all the chassis and general dynamic balance. The bet is very high. Changing the geometry of the soil and the diffuser without having the suspension complement that stabilizes it is like modifying the wing of a plane without calculating how the fuselage will respond. On the track, that means that any charging gain can be easily annulled if the car bounces more. It becomes nervous in braking or loses traction when leaving slow curves. In this context, Lewis Hamilton arrived at the free training session, hoping that this new package would make SF25 a competitive car. But as we will see, what he discovered was very different from what Maranello's engineers promised in previous simulations. What happened after the training session was, in essence, an emotional and technical X-ray of what it means to pilot for Ferrari in this 2025. Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion, a pilot who has lived with single sequins of all kinds, got off the SF25 with a mixture of frustration and confusion. Not because the car was uncontrollable or openly defective, but for something more disturbing. I could not understand how it responded. His words were not explosive or criticism directly to the team, but in his tone there was a clear message. It is not the normal information we are receiving on how much load you added to the car that is not necessarily clear. That statement is brutal in his honesty. In other words, Ferrari has made so deep and possibly so disconnected from the reality of track that not even the pilot can feel the difference clearly. The correlation between simulator, wind tunnel, and real behavior seems to have broken. And when that happens, development enters an area of darkness where the data ceases to be useful and everything becomes rehearsal and error. This type of uncertainty is not new for Ferrari. Throughout the last decade, the team has dealt with that lack of alignment between theory and reality. But when the star pilot, signed with bombs and dishes to lead a new cycle, transmits to the world that cannot understand whether the improvements serve or not, the situation becomes unsustainable. After the sessions, Hamilton expanded his analysis. He said the car did not feel bad, that it was not a disastrous machine, but immediately clarified with a phrase that summarized all Ferrari's technical drama. We are far from the leaders. There is the hardest blow. Because it is not enough to have a decent car. Not in a championship where McLaren, Mercedes, and Red Bull have made real, measurable, effective leaps. In comparison, Ferrari seems to have invested in an aerodynamic patch that does not change his place in the hierarchy. The most striking thing is that Hamilton, who for years remained reluctant to modify his driving style to adapt to the problems of Mercedes, has made intentional adjustments to better understand SF25. It has begun to imitate the Leclerc approach, releasing the accelerator before, carrying the brake progressively, trying to find the sweet point that allows a higher minimum curve speed. And yet, even with that technical humility, the results do not arrive. This is not a criticism of Hamilton. It is, in fact, a reflection of to what extent is committed to this project. But it also exposes that the problem is not in the pilot, but in the architecture of the car. When even one of the most adaptable and successful pilots in history cannot generate confidence with the car, something is wrong in the nucleus. Ferrari seems to be trapped in a paradox. It has improved but not enough to make a difference. And in Formula One, that thin line between progress and irrelevance can be the cruelest of all. Because sometimes, making a lot of effort and remaining the same or worse is even more demoralizing than doing nothing. And that is exactly what Hamilton's face reflected when getting out of the car in Austria. The consequences of this session in Austria go far beyond the immediate performance of the SF25 or Hamilton's mood. What was seen on the track was a symptom, but what is at stake is something much deeper: the viability of the Ferrari 2025 project. Because if this update package, the most ambitious to date, fails to change the competitive order, then the concept of the entire car could be questioned. Ferrari had sold this evolution of the soil as a turning point, a tool to stabilize the aerodynamic platform and recover the pilot's confidence. But what he delivered was a car that is still too dependent on the context. It is still a car that needs everything to be perfectly aligned: temperature, height, compounds, side wind. That is a fragile, almost capricious car. And in a modern Formula One, where adaptation capacity is vital, that is a mediocrity sentence. Even more worrying is the technical silence that leaked in the paddock. Engineers who admit, under condition of anonymity, that they are not sure if the wind tunnel is generating coherent data, that the CFD model does not align with what the sensors capture on the track. This lack of correlation not only hinders the development of the car, it destroys confidence in the process. And when engineers do not believe in what their tools produce, the entire system enters a loop of indecision. It is tested, it is discarded, redesigned, but without a clear direction. Hamilton, meanwhile, has assumed a function that goes beyond the pilot. In just a few weeks, it has become a translator between the car and the team. You are trying to define a technical philosophy that allows SF25 to evolve towards a real identity. But that takes time. And in F1, time is the most scarce and expensive resource. Every weekend that Ferrari passes stagnant is an opportunity that loses in front of McLaren, Mercedes, or Red Bull. Each race without progress is a career in which the project is buried more. And there is still another layer. The next phase of updates, focused on a new rear suspension, was postponed. That may seem like a prudent technical decision, but it can also be interpreted as an alarm signal. Are they sure what they are doing? Or are they simply postponing the problem, waiting for another piece to fit as if by magic? This uncertainty generates a dangerous feeling: the fear of repeating the errors of previous years. Ferrari cannot afford another season marked by the disconnection between promises and implementation. Because it is not only the car that is at stake. It is prestige, credibility, the story of a team that has been looking for its redemption for more than 15 years. And if Hamilton, with all his career, fails to see tangible advances in the coming months, an emotional crack will open in the team. Because every great pilot needs to see a light at the end of the tunnel. And until now, in Austria, that light is still dim. Just a reflection of what it could have been, but still far from what it should be. And now that we have broken up with surgical precision everything that happened in that key session in Austria, the inevitable question that is floating is, can Ferrari give Hamilton, at some point in this season, a car capable of truly fighting for victories? Or are we attending, once again, a cycle that promises transformation but ends up trapped in its own technical limits? Because Ferrari's recent history is marked by cycles that begin with hope, with talent, with bold ideas, but that are diluted in execution. We saw it with Vettel. We saw it with Leclerc. And now we see it with Hamilton, a man who has left behind a dynasty in Mercedes to pursue a dream that, for now, seems more intangible than ever. And what do you think? Are we simply before an adjustment period that needs time, or do you think the concept of SF25 is convicted from the base? Can Hamilton, with his experience, with his ability to adapt, with his technical instinct, be the catalyst of a true change in Maranello, or his signing will be remembered as another wasted opportunity? The question remains on the table. Not only for you that you are seeing this, also for all Ferrari. Are they going to change the fate, or simply repeat it?